Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 9th Annual Bishop Hill Chautauqua. Our theme this year is Swedish and Bishop Hill characters to honor Bishop Hill's 175th anniversary. My name is Todd Decker. I'm the administrator for the Bishop Hill Heritage Association. So we want to thank you all for coming today. We have a wonderful series of programs today and tomorrow. Before we get started with the first program, of course, we always have a few announcements. First off, we want to thank Twin Flower Inn and the regional media for being our local sponsors today and tomorrow for this event. Over here in our tent area, we do have information about future Bishop Hill events in our visitor's guide, Chautauqua posters, Chautauqua bookmarks that let you know what the event schedule is, as well as hand sanitizers and masks in case you need it. And again, today's and tomorrow's events are all free by various sponsors, we will get to in a minute. But we do have a donation jar in case you really enjoy it and like to contribute to our next year's Chautauqua. In case of restrooms, the closest one is to your right, to that building close to the baseball diamond. It's the white door. Has a ramp, has AC in it. It's great. I've been in there. I've used it a few times. It's good. And there's also northeast corner, across the northeast corner of the park in the Welcome Center is also a handicap accessible air-conditioned restroom as well. If you need drinks, the closest drinks are P.L. Johnson's and the Connolly Store. You also have the bakery and filling station close by as well. And the Kranz Cafe down the road a little ways also has ice cream. Because there will be breaks in between programs where you can use the restroom, get drinks, and so forth. So our first program today is sponsored by the Barbara Osher Prosciutto Foundation. We're very pleased to announce that Bucky Halker will be performing and talking about Joe Hill, a Swedish American labor and social activist. And without further ado, because you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to Bucky Halker.
All right. Well, thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, my name's Bucky Halker. Don't tell anybody, but I'm actually much more Danish than Swedish. My last name means half swamp, which I actually kind of like. But I've done a lot of work with American labor history, protests, music, and poetry, including a lot of stuff from Illinois with coal miners and other workers across the state. And you can't work on American protest music without coming across Joe Hill sooner or later. So what I'm going to do for the next 40 minutes or so is play you some music, mostly, and try to keep my mouth shut. But I will talk a little bit just to give you a little overview. So you know a little more about Joe Hill. Some people don't know much about him. All they know is that Joan Baez sang a song about him at Woodstock, which is probably the first time I ever heard anything about Joe Hill as a kid growing up in Ashland, Wisconsin, of all places. So why don't I play you a song, and I'll say more about myself and the music as we go along. One thing about Joe Hill, he often gets tossed together with sort of the Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie crowd. Musically, that wouldn't be entirely accurate. It would be way off base. Joe Hill was born in 1879 in Galva, Sweden. I know I'm mispronouncing that. At least the Swedes tell me that when I do a Swedish program somewhere. Came to the U.S. in 1903. His family had started off as what you could call a working class, middle class family. His dad was a skilled tradesman and had a good job in Sweden, was in an industrial accident, was injured, eventually dies. What are you going to do? The kids have to go to work. Joe gets tuberculosis. He's lucky, ends up in the hospital with some pioneering treatment, survives. But then in 1903, he and his brother decide it's time to get out of Sweden, come to the U.S. They wander around, and Joe becomes radicalized in the process and becomes a songwriter. And his music borrows a lot from church hymns and so on, you'll hear some of that. Like many American protest songwriters, he would borrow the most popular hymn tunes of the 19th century, and I'll try to mention that as we go through. But also borrowed from vaudeville, early Tin Pan Alley, music hall stuff, and listen to the hits of the day, which often were coming out on wax cylinders and 78 RPM records. So this particular tune borrows the tune from a song written in Chicago in 1864 by George Root. He wrote some songs, hymns and other songs, and a famous Civil War song called Tramp, 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 which was among the most popular songs of the Civil War for the Union Army. Joe Hill learned it, takes it, and writes this song called The Tramp. If you law will shut your trap, I will tell you about a chap. He was broken up against it too for fair. He was not the kind to shirk, he was looking hard for work, but he heard that same old story everywhere. Tramp, 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 keep on a-trapping. There's nothing doing here for you. If I catch you round again, you will wear the ball and chain. Keep on trapping, that's the best thing you can do. He walked up and down the street till his shoes fell off his feet. In his house he spied a lady cooking stew. Well, he said, how do you do? May I chop some wood for you? But what the lady told him made him feel so blue. Tramp, 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 keep on a-trapping. There's nothing doing here for you. If I catch you round again, you will wear the ball and chain. Keep on trapping, that's the best thing you can do. Across the street, a sign he read, worked for Jesus, so it said. And he said, here is my chance, I'll surely try. Well, he knelt down on the floor till his knees got rather sore. But at eating time he heard that preacher say, tramp, 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 keep on a-trapping. There's nothing doing here for you. If I catch you round again, you will wear the ball and chain. Keep on trapping, that's the best thing you can do. Down the street he met a cop, and the copper made him stop. And he asked him, when did you roll into town? Come with me up to the judge. But the judge just said, oh fudge, bums that have no money, they needn't come around. Tramp, 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 keep on a-trapping. There's nothing doing here for you. And if I catch you round again, you will wear the ball and chain. Keep on trapping, that's the best thing you can do. Finally came that happy day when his life did pass away, and he was sure he'd go to heaven when he died. When he reached that pearly gate, St. Peter, that mean old skate, slammed the gate right in his face and loudly cried. He said, now tramp, 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 keep on a-trapping. Nothing doing here for you. And if I catch you round again, you will wear that ball and chain. Keep on tramping, that's the best thing you can do. Keep on tramping, that's the best thing you can do. Thank you. The Tramp by Joe Hill. You can see some themes in there that come up again and again a lot in protest songs in the 19th and early 20th century. One is a kind of anti-clerical stance you heard in there because until the 1930s, the majority of the American clergy, with the exception of some renegade priests, a few Protestant preachers, and some Jewish rabbis, were really conservative. against child labor legislation, minimum wage laws, labor reform, unions, you name it. They just told you to, go to church and be holy and you'll get your reward in heaven. So you could sense that he's making fun of the church, he's making fun of the police, making fun of just the general public for being so hostile towards people who really couldn't help it. Because it was the late 19th, early 20th century. It wasn't exactly like the Great Depression, but at least in the 1890s, it was really a bad situation. Lots of people were out of work and they had to go on the tramp. So he was trying to write the stuff to support them. He joined a union called the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, founded in Chicago in 1905 by people like Eugene Debs and Father Haggerty, a renegade Catholic priest, and a few other people. And they their goal was to overthrow capitalism and set up a workers' commonwealth. They were opposed to the Socialist Party. They also fought the Communist Party later on. Their feeling was that workers should set up the system within their work environments to try to run the production system in the United States. Really an interesting union and had a big impact in different parts of the world. There were even IWW chapters that were quite large and had some impact in places like Hawaii, Australia, and New Zealand. So I'm going to play you another song with a little Illinois connection. This is one that Carl Sandburg picked up more than once when he was collecting songs. It's based on the popular song of the day called Casey Jones, the engineer. He dies in a wreck. And there's at least some folklorists who say that the original Casey Jones was from Illinois. And we do know it was a popular song here. But Joe Hill decided he'd take it in a little different direction. So I'll tell you the story. Some of you might know engineers were called the aristocracy, part of the aristocracy of the working class, because they were highly skilled, got well paid, often didn't give a damn about the brakemen or the gandy dancers or anybody else that was working below them. So this kind of mocks that attitude. And as I said, Casey Jones. And the SP line I use in here, that's the Southern Pacific, which was a notorious anti-labor railroad run by Jay Gould in the United States. Once said the best thing you could do to striking workers is to shoot them with a Gatling gun. Yep, that was the guy. The workers on the SP line to strike sent out a call. Casey Jones, the engineer, he wouldn't strike at all. His boiler, it was leaking. His drive was on the bum, and his engine and his bearings, they were all out of plumb. Casey Jones kept his junk pile running. Casey Jones was always working double time. Well, Casey Jones got himself a wooden medal for being good and faithful on the SP line. The workers said to Casey, now help us win the strike. But Casey Jones said, let me alone, you ought to take a hike. Then Casey's wheezy engine ran right off the worn-out track, and Casey hit the river with an awful crack. Casey Jones hit the river bottom. Casey Jones, he broke his blooming spine. Well, Casey Jones became an Angelino. He took a trip to heaven on the SP line. Casey got to heaven right up to the pearly gate. He said, I'm Casey Jones, I haul the SP freight. Well, you're just a man, said Peter, the musician's on strike. You can get a job scabbing anytime you like. Casey Jones got a job in heaven. Casey Jones thought he was doing mighty fine. Well, Casey Jones went scabbing on the angels, just like he did the workers on the SP line. Got to heaven. They said this isn't fair. For Casey Jones to go around scabbing everywhere. The Angels Union 23, they sure were there, and they promptly fired Casey down that golden stair. Casey Jones went to hell a-flying. Casey Jones, the devil said, oh, fine. Well, Casey Jones, get busy shoveling sulfur. That's what you get for scabbing on the SP line. That's what you get for scabbing on the SP line. That's what you get for scabbing on the SP line. Casey Jones, that's the song. As you can see here, he's very pro-labor. So I'm going to switch things around here, and I'll explain why in just a second. If nothing else, this will let cooler air circulate around part of my body anyway. Playing guitar is not fun in hot weather for some reason, though I've done it a lot. Joe Hill made a trip to Hawaii as a longshoreman, which is how they often spread the gospel of labor around the world. At that time, they would hop on ships, work in different places, and take the songs with them. And he went to Hawaii and stayed there. We don't quite know how long. Went with a friend of his. They lived on the beach. They spent time with the native Hawaiian longshoremen and learned music from them and taught them songs and vice versa. And I always figured, well, I don't know for sure, but that was at exactly the time that the U.S. was building up its larger imperial holdings, and people were interested in Hawaii. And Hawaiian music began to catch on quickly in the U.S., including the ukulele, and then after that the slide, which turns into the slide guitar, dobro, pedal steel guitar. This is a song which uses a tune from a song called Sunlight, Sunlight, which was a popular vaudeville Tin Pan Alley tune in this era from 1913. And as you listen to the words, you'll hear some things, just as a little bit of background to it. The U.S. got involved in the Spanish-American War in 1898. Nobody's quite sure what happened. I mean, the battleship Maine was blown up in the harbor, and some people think it was certain key people, wealthy Spaniards from Cuba, trying to get the U.S. involved, since they controlled Cuba. Some people think it might have been people from the U.S. Nobody really knows. But it started a war, and many people died. So I will play you a song that's got definitely, it's suspicious of the military. As I was hiking round the town to find a job one day, saw a sign 1,000 men were wanted right away to take a trip around the world in Uncle Sammy's fleet. I signed my name 12 times upon that great big sheet. Stung right, S-T-U-N-G. Stung right, easy mark, that's me. When my term is over and again I'm free, there'll be no more trips around the world for me. The man, he said, our U.S. fleet, it is no place for slaves. For everything you have to do is stand and watch the waves. But in the morn at 5 o'clock, they woke me from my snooze to scrub the deck and polish brass and shine the captain's shoes. Stung right, S-T-U-N-G. I was stung right, easy mark, that's free. When my term is over and again I'm free, there'll be no more trips around the world for me. One day a dude in uniform at me began to shout. I simply plugged him in the jaw and knocked him down and out. slammed me right in irons then and said, you are a case. On bread and water, then I lived for 27 days. Stung right, S-T-U-N-G. Stung right, easy mark, that's me. When my term is over and again I'm free, there'll be no more trips around this world for me. Some time ago when Uncle Sam had a war with Spain, many of the boys in blue were in the battle slain. Not all were killed by bullets though, not by any means. The biggest part were killed by armor, pork, and beans. Stung right, S-T-U-N-G. Stung right, easy mark, that's me. When my term is over and again I'm free, there'll be no more trips around the world for me. There'll be no more trips around the world for me. Oh, I was blowing reveille there for you. I should mention that last verse is actually true about the biggest part were killed by armor, pork, and beans. Number of people who died in the Spanish-American War for the U.S., 2/3 of them were killed by contaminated rations. Almost all of them packed in guess what town? Yeah. Chicago, the packing houses. There was an investigation, of course, but nothing ever happened to the head of armor and the other major packing houses. So anyway, that is a true story at the end. Joe Hill was arrested in 1914 in Salt Lake City. I just look around and think how many people I see here, if they went to Salt Lake City today, might still get arrested. Sorry. I lived in Idaho for a long time, which borders Utah. And yeah, I'm not going to get into it. It's an interesting place, I'll say that. So I'm going to play a song that he wrote while he was in jail. He was executed in 1915. He was charged with murder. There was no evidence, literally no evidence, other than the fact that he was outside of town, in fact, staying outside of town, but he was known to the authorities by then because he was involved with the IWW and had been around the country singing songs and playing them, and some of them were getting well known in among labor groups and made him an object of suspicion on the part of the authorities. So when a small grocery store shopkeeper was killed in Salt Lake in the city, Joe Hill was arrested, charged with murder, and eventually executed. Many people intervened, including the King of Sweden, asked for a stay of execution, and even President Wilson also sought to intervene and stop the execution, the President of the United States at that time. The governor of Utah, a quite conservative man and well aligned with the mining interests in the state, and Joe Hill had been involved in some of the strikes against the mines there, and up into Utah and Idaho and so on, silver mines. So he was made a kind of ritual sacrifice, I guess you could say. But he wrote this song for Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, a young woman at the time involved in social reform in the U.S. She came to visit him, and he wrote a song for her called Rebel Girl. There are women of many descriptions in this queer world, as everyone knows. Some are living in beautiful mansions. They are wearing the finest of clothes. There are blue-blooded queens and princesses who have charms made of diamonds and pearls. But the only thoroughbred lady is a rebel girl. That's a rebel girl, that's a rebel girl. To the working class, she's a precious pearl. She brings courage, pride, and joy to a fighting rebel boy. We've had girls before, but we need some more in the industrial workers of the world. Yes, it's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. Yes, her hands may be hardened from labor, and her dress may not be very fine, but a heart in her bosom is beating that is true to her class and her kind. And the grafters in terror are trembling when her spite and defiance she hurls. For the only and thoroughbred lady was a rebel girl. That's a rebel girl, that's a rebel girl. To the working class, she's a precious pearl. She brings courage, pride, and joy to a fighting rebel boy. We've had girls before, but we need some more in the industrial workers of the world. Yes, it's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. Yes, it's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. People ask, well, how did his songs get circulated? Well, a lot of times they were... we got a bird call man in the back row there. Did you call those birds in for us? Did you do that? No, he's not nodding his head in agreement. Just kidding. It's one of my favorite pastimes during the COVID crisis was to try to learn how to do the cardinal and the red-winged blackbird. Joe Hill's songs were published in papers, but they were also circulated with a lot of the workers who rode the freight trains to get around to find work. There were a lot of migrant workers in the U.S., millions of them in this time period, and Joe Hill's songs would be carried around the country to different places. They were also published in this, which is still published to this day, the Little Red Songbook. This is a facsimile of the 1923 edition. The origins of these little songbooks have to do with the history of Protestantism, the Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, the evangelical Christians of all political persuasions used to have little songbooks they'd publish. Why? You can put them in your pocket, bring them to your camp meeting. Simple tunes, simple songs to sing. So Labor does this. They start doing it, believe me, just after the end of the Civil War. And Joe Hill's songs, he's got more songs in here than any other individual author. So that's where many of those came from. So I just wanted to mention that. I think my pages just got blown over here, so I want to get back and make... You got to sing a song, right? You haven't done that yet, so we got to make you do this one. All right, let's... This was his most popular song, and when I was doing research on Joe Hill, I discovered that this song has been published and sung and recorded in the United States and Canada, but also Germany, England, Australia, New Zealand, Italy, France, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. So it's made the rounds. South Africa, too, now that I think of it, it was published down there as well. So it was very popular. Usually sung on street corners, often in competition with the Salvation Army. They were trying to save souls. The IWW was trying to get you to get some food somewhere and a decent wage. So your job is just to sing along with me. It's sort of like lining out, an old tradition in Protestantism. I'll sing you the line, you answer me, okay, when we get to the chorus. And again, it's making fun of established Protestant Christianity. I should mention, too, that as a child, Joe Hill did go to Salvation Army meetings, so he was well schooled in these songs and the melodies and, yeah, the message. So, long-haired preachers come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right. But when you ask them for something to eat, they will answer in voices so sweet. You will eat by and by, in that glorious land in the sky, Work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. Yeah, you say that's a lie at the end of each one of those, okay? Well, the Starvation Army band plays. They sing and they clap and they pray till they get all your coins on their drum. Then they'll tell you that you're just a bum. You will eat by and by in that glorious land in the sky. Work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pride in the sky when you die. That's a lie. Holy rollers and jumpers come out. They holler, they jump, and they shout. Give your money to Jesus, they say. He will cure all diseases today. You will eat by and by in that glorious land in the sky. Work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. If you fight hard for your children and wife, you try to get some of the good things in life, you're just a sinner and a bad man, they tell. When you die, you go straight off to hell. You will eat by and by in that glorious land in the sky. Work and pray, live on hay. You get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. Working folks from all countries unite. Side by side in our freedom we'll fight. When the world and its wealth we have gained, to those grafters we'll sing this refrain. You will eat by and by when you learn how to cook and to fry. Cook and fry. Chop some wood. That'll do you good. You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. There you go. I should also mention the tune for that was another one he took from a very popular Protestant hymn that was made popular by Dwight Moody and Ira Sankey, the gospel preacher and his choir director living in Chicago at the time. Joe has a reputation for being, kind of tough, and his lyrics sarcastic. Making fun of the established order and his quest for workers' justice. Oh, there's a black ant on the ukulele. That's a new one. That could be a song. I got black ants on my ukulele. Well, I guess better there than on my steak at night, right? So, but the irony of this is, like he told his guard at the prison in Salt Lake, you've already got 2 wives, Mormon at the time. Polygamy was it illegal but still practiced? Well, a lot of it's still practiced in Utah. But anyway, he told the guard, I know that from experience. Not me, but he said, you have 2 wives, I'm never going to have any. This was shortly before he was executed. But he really did want to have a love life, and he knew he wasn't going to have that. This was a song that was found in the place where he was staying outside of Salt Lake, called My Dreamland Girl. He wrote a couple of these. I got another 1 or 2 from the archives in Sweden that they found later on. They're kind of romantic tunes. So there was no music for this, so I tried to take this sort of standard, sort of vaudeville, early Tin Pan Alley chord progression and melody and use this. These songs like this, I should mention, instead of thinking Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie, you're better off to think Rudy Valley and Kate Smith. They'd be closer stylistically to what Joe was at least writing in the genre. Here we go. It's called My Dreamland Girl. Would you like to get acquainted with my dreamland girl divine? Never was a picture painted fairer than this girl of mine. Sweet and graceful like a pansy, bright and charming like a pearl. She's the idol of my fancy, she's my own dreamland girl. Charming fairy queen of my dreams, ere before me her face brightly beamed. Night and day I'm dreaming of you. Someday my sweet dreams perhaps will come true. Someday my sweet dreams perhaps will come true. She is coy and captivating, Venus-like in grace and pose, with an air more fascinating than the fragrance of a rose. Like the stars her eyes are shining, neath a wealth of golden hair. My heart is ever pining for my Greenland girl so fair. Charming fairy queen of my dreams, ere before me your face brightly beams. Night and day I'm dreaming of you. Someday my sweet dreams perhaps will come true. Someday my sweet dreams perhaps will come true. Charming fairy queen of my dreams, ere before me your face brightly beams. Night and day I'm dreaming of you. Someday my sweet dreams perhaps will come true. Someday my sweet dreams perhaps will come true. Just adds a nice little alternate sort of interpretation of Joel and what he was thinking. I guess I should finish up, so I'm torn on this. I think I'll... Tony, do you want to hear Mr. Block? That's my wife back there, because if I don't play what she wants, I'll hear about it later in the car home. Do you want to hear Mr. Block, or do you want There Is Power in the Union? What? Okay, we'll play Mr. Block. This is a song that borrows the tune from a big 1908 hit called It Looks Like a Big Night Tonight, which was written by Van Alstyne and Harry Williams on 78 RPM record all over the place, and all the little bands that came around and played the opera houses in places like Macomb or the Quad Cities, Moline, Ashland, Wisconsin, would have likely played that song in 1910, 1912. So Joe took this and wrote this other song called Mr. Block. Joe was also a cartoonist and contributed a lot to the IWW newspaper. And I should mention the IWW, in terms of the history of American humor, clearly had a role in the development of sarcasm in the humor of American society, because they do a lot of it. In this particular case, they had a term for the people who were like always willing to work overtime for no extra pay or do crazy jobs that they weren't paid enough for. They were often referred, or wouldn't join the union even when given an opportunity, like if they worked in the early auto plant or something like that. Rather, they would just, instead of calling them, fellow workers, they called them blockheads. And they would have cartoons of these guys with a square or a rectangle over the top of their head. So Joe wrote this song. And I will mention one thing in here. You'll hear about the Spanish-American War again, but also the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, which was founded in the 1870s, still exists today. In its early years, until it was forced to bring in the auto workers, the Caterpillar workers, let's see who else I can think of, textile workers, women, African Americans, so they were forced to do that in the 30s. It was mostly skilled workers, like my grandfather, who happened to be a bricklayer in Chicago for 54 years. Why, I don't know, but he kept working there. But it was mostly the really skilled workers, the carpenters and the bricklayers and electricians and stuff that were in the AFL. So the industrial workers of the world tried to organize everybody. So they would, go in and take on difficult tasks. Organizing African-American longshoremen in New Orleans, that would cost your life. Many IWW members were lynched and hanged, and yes, even some that were veterans of World War I were killed by the very early forms of the American Legion in the United States. So here is a song called Mr. Block, where he makes fun of the AFL for being so conservative. Please give me your attention, I'll introduce to you a man that is a credit to the great red, white, and blue. I feel like I should have a megaphone, and I could, yes. His head is made of lumber, solid as a rock. He is a common worker. His name is Mr. Block. Block, he thinks he may be president someday. Oh, Mr. Block, you were born by mistake. You take the cake. You make me ache. Tie a rock round your block and then jump in the lake. Kindly do that for liberty's sake. Yeah, Mr. Block got lucky. He found a job by G. The shark got $7 for the job at Fair and Fee. They shipped him to the desert and dumped him with his truck. But when he tried to find his job, he sure was out of luck. He shouted, "That's too raw, I'll fix them with the law." Oh, Mr. Block, you were born by mistake. You take the cake. You make me ache. Tie a rock around your block and then jump in the lake. Kindly do that for liberty's sake. Old Block hiked to the city 'cause he wasn't doing well. He said, "I'll join the union, the great AFL." He got a job next morning, got fired in the night. He said, "I'll see Sam Gompers and he'll fix the foreman right." Gompers said, "You see, yeah, you got our sympathy." Oh, Mr. Block, you were born by mistake. You take the cake. You make me ache. Tie a rock around your block and then jump in the lake. Kindly do that for liberty's sake. The money kings in Cuba blew up the gunboat Maine. Block got awful angry and blamed it all on Spain. So he went right into battle. There he lost his leg. Now he's peddling shoestrings and walking on a peg. He shouts, "Remember Maine, hurrah to hell with Spain." Oh, Mr. Block, you were born by mistake. You take the cake. You make me ache. Tie a rock around your block and then jump in the lake. Kindly do that for liberty's sake. Poor Block, he died one evening, I'm very glad to state. He climbed that golden ladder right up to the pearly gate. He said, "Oh, Mr. Peter, one word I'd like to tell. Oh, please, I'd like to meet the Astor Bells in John D. Rockefeller." Pete said, "Is that so? I'm sorry, you'll find them down below." Oh, Mr. Block, you were born by mistake. You take the cake. You make me ache. Tie a rock around your block and then jump in the lake. Kindly do that for liberty's sake. Kindly do that for liberty's sake. Well, I think I'll call it the end of my set. But if you got any questions, please fire away. I'm glad to field anything you might have before Brian gets up here. And yes.
Do you know where Joe Hill was buried?
His ashes have been spread in various places, so I'm not quite sure what the exact answer would be. Yes. In fact, hang on just a second. Let me read this to you. That was a good question. Let me read his last will from 1915. He wrote this just before he died. My will is easy to decide, for there is nothing to divide. My kin don't need to fuss and moan. Moss does not cling to a rolling stone. My body, oh, if I could choose, I would want to ashes it reduce, and let the merry breezes blow my dust to where some flowers grow. Perhaps some fading flower then would come to life and bloom again. This is my last and final will. Good luck to all of you, Joe Hill. That was the last thing he put out before he died. Yeah. So I guess that sort of answers the question. Yes. Yes.
A lot of these songs end with the verse about going to heaven.
Yes.
What do you think that means, that he does that so often?
Well, that's an interesting question because it comes up a lot in the labor protest songs, especially in the 19th century. Just me, from all my research, I think that the kind of religious sentiment that fueled anti-slavery in the United States, the Second Great Awakening, it helped lead to the foundation of colonies like this around the country. There were a lot of them, and not just Swedish, there were American colonies like this. The early women's rights movement, movements for education, a lot of this was inspired by this idea that in order to make, they would have said, a Christian world, a better world, we need to act better towards other people. We need to create a common purpose in the United States, around the world, that binds us together rather than finds reasons to divide us into this or that. So that, it's common in those movements, and it comes into the labor movement. There were a lot of, Protestant ministers in the 1880s and 90s who got tied in with the Knights of Labor and other labor groups from that time. And as I mentioned, a lot of the songs talk about religion, specifically Jesus, the message of Jesus, and how we need to follow that. And labor is trying to do that by getting everybody unionized, better wages, living conditions, enough food to eat that. I think Joe Hill, he came out of I mentioned the Salvation Army. He went to those meetings as a kid. He listened to the songs. I think even though he's, critical of it, my personal feeling is he's still influenced by it. And he has this idea that he might mock Christianity, but part of that is because he has an idea in his head that the message of Christ is one of commonality amongst us, not division and oppression. That's how I interpret that stuff. Yeah, thank you. All right, well, I'll be around. I do have some CDs, and there's lots of liner notes on the Joe Hill CD and some songs that have never been recorded by anybody else, and some spoken word from some old hobos who claim they knew him. Got a little of that on there, but I do want to thank you. It's always a pleasure to come out here. I really like being here, and Todd says he's going to buy me a house here someday so I can move here. Because he's getting paid so much money in his job. Actually, the heat, it is warm up here. I can tell when I try to do the individual strings. It's a little difficult. But anyway, thank you so much, and I do appreciate it. Stick around.